So let's rethink the whole Palantir story. And let's find out if we want to renew our vows, or maybe we find out we're stuck in this horrible relationship and we have no business to be in it. Now look, Palantir has not dropped so much compared to the DPO price. The DPO price was $10. It's currently at $8. That's a 14% drop. That's not a huge deal, especially in this market. But that stat is misleading because most retail investors got in at $20 to $25. Some even higher. Now, if that's the case for you, which I'm assuming is the case for most retail investors, then you're down 67%. And that's no laughing matter. That's a huge deal. Now, here's the problem. With how much Palantir dropped, I think certain members of the Palantir investment community tend to completely write it off by saying, well, it's just a bad market. And yes, the market is absolute doo-doo. But let's see if Palantir is just a victim of circumstance. If Palantir is just captive by the horrible market. Now, Palantir is trading on the New York Stock Exchange, but for all intents and purposes, this is a NASDAQ company. Classic. Growth, tech, and it's on the New York Stock Exchange for historical reasons. Now, some people will have a problem with me using the NASDAQ and NASDAQ companies comparables for Palantir because they are trading on New York Stock Exchange. In that case, I suggest you have a glass of water, you take a deep breath, you'll be fine. Deal with it. Now, if you look at the NASDAQ is down over the past year, since September of last year, 24%. If you look at comparable companies like CrowdStrike, like Snowflake, they're down 30%. Now, you compare that to Palantir with its 67% drop. Clearly, this isn't just about the market. Yes, the market is definitely part of the reason, but Palantir did drop double than everything else I just showed you. So just to claim that they're a victim of the market without actually paying attention to the actual issues is a little bit misleading. So it's not just the market. Let's be honest before we start this evaluation. And if you have a problem with me being honest about Palantir and saying the good and the bad, first of all, remember, I'm a Palantir bull and I'm heavily invested. And number two, that's okay. You don't have to like me or watch my videos. If that bothers you, feel free not to watch the video or even unsubscribe. It's fine. I'll deal with it. Now let's talk about the good and the bad. Now, there's a reason, I think, that Palantir is down 67% on the year. I mean, September 2021, September 2022, that year represented a lot of the bullshit floating up with Palantir. And I call it the I-damn. And the reason I call it the I-damn is because it's easier for me to remember for the purpose of this video. So the I stands for insider selling. The D stands for delusion. The A stands for arrogance. The M stands for margins. And the E stands for expensive. I-damn. Mainly, the argument is the company's multiples are too expensive. The delusion is too crazy. There's too much insider selling. The margins are not that hot. And simply put, Alex Karp's arrogance is not just annoying. In fact, it might be detrimental to the business. These are the main arguments I can think of as far as why people tend to classify Palantir as uninvestable. And yes, there are people like that. Palantir is a very polarizing company. Some love it, some hate it, and that's okay. Now, what I want to do in this video is examine. Is that Italian? I'm insulting Italian people right now. Unbelievable. What I want to do in this video is examine whether any of these factors have improved enough for me to say, well, this is still good enough for me, and I can actually see them getting better. Let's start with the multiples. Palantir at some point were trading at 30 times sales, currently down to 8 times sales. With the compression of multiples in the market, they're definitely not as expensive as they were. In fact, you can buy them at about 1/4 of the price that you would have paid just a year ago. So as far as Palantir being expensive, maybe you can still make an argument that even at 8 times sales, it is expensive. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. but it's 4 times cheaper. So it's getting cheaper, it's getting better for the purpose of my examination, anyways. Now, let's talk about margins, because as far as margins, here's where I think the biggest misconception is. I think if you are looking for a profitable company as far as EBITDA, as far as net profits, I think Palantir isn't going to be one for a while. And if you're looking for that in Palantir, it's kind of like going to McDonald's and trying to get a salad. I mean, you can get a salad, but it's not going to be amazing. I mean, you shouldn't go to McDonald's to get a salad. If you're looking for a bottom line profitable company, you don't invest in a high growth tech play like Palantir. Their margins as far as gross profit is in line with SaaS companies, which is about 80%. But yes, they're not EBITDA profitable. They're not net profitable. They're free cash flow profitable, sure. But I mean, they don't try to be. The company is intentionally not going for profitability, but rather reinvesting the money and going into growth mode versus profitability for GAAP purposes. And if you actually heard Alex Karp talk about it, he actually said it's going to be years until Palantir is actually GAAP profitable. They're not chasing that. So if that sort of thing bothers you, this company isn't for you, because clearly they're not on the path to GAAP profitability anytime soon. No, that part hasn't got better. So far we have the multiples becoming cheaper, but profitability basically staying the same as far as non-existent. Now let's talk about the other factors. Let's talk about Alex Karp's arrogance. Now we saw Alex Karp absolutely destroy, self-implode, and I think embarrass Palantir on multiple interviews, multiple earnings calls. Even though in the beginning it was a little bit endearing, at some point it gotten really frustrating, because I believe that this kind of attitude started to seep into Palantir's own business development and sales culture, that arrogance. And I believe that has a destructive impact on the company, and that's not something I won't ever see in a company I invested in. Now, in the last earnings call, we saw Alex Karp absolutely completely lose it, banging on the table, saying some really weird stuff like our clients hate us, but they have to work with us because there's no alternatives. Like absolutely mind-boggling things were said. And his total lack of awareness of how ridiculous that was alarming. I'm not going to lie. Now, I haven't sold my stock, but I was like, this is not good. Now, just the other day, just 2 or 3 days ago, Alex Karp went on CNBC and had what I think was his best interview so far. He was relaxed. He was calm. He was answering coherent answers. He wasn't being arrogant. He was making fun of himself. And he actually was on point. So if you want to take that piece of interview that happened just a few days ago and compare it to Alex Karp from the last earnings call, it's literally a different person. I don't know how can somebody go 180 degrees like that. But Alex Karp has either been coached or he basically got his shit together. Whatever it is, that arrogance, that absolutely lack of self-awareness is gone. There's a new Karp in town, and what I saw on CNBC, I like a lot. So as far as, corporate arrogance and Alex Karp arrogance, that thing seems to be history. So that's getting better. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room. And let's talk about the 2 last points here. Dilution and insider selling. Now, as far as insider selling, the company is still engaged in insider selling, but if you actually review these sales, they're automatic sales. They're essentially part of employee stock option plans. But what's actually important here to tell you is that Alex Karp, the guy who has been heavily selling and put on the spot for that, has not sold a single share of Palantir since November 2021. So Alex Karp is coming up on a year without selling a single share of Palantir. So if you want to talk about insider selling, Alex Karp is not selling, even though he technically can and could have, but he's holding on to his shares. So that's a huge test. If Karp isn't selling, that means that everything that he sold before was indeed part of his payment for his own options plan, the one he was granted for the next 10 years. But then again, we're getting sidetracked here. Let's just keep it straight. Alex Karp made no insider sales for 10 months. And it doesn't seem like there's any coming up anytime soon. Now, the last point here I want to talk about is dilution. And if you look at dilution with Palantir, it can really screw with your head because their dilution is just insane. From 2019 to 2020, the dilution was 69%. By the way, that's just proof we're in the matrix, but hold on, it actually gets better. The next year, from 2020 to 2021, the dilution was 96%. Now, that certainly proves we're in the matrix because we had 69, 96. So they almost doubled the share count from 2019 to 2021, which is absolutely insane. And yes, there were valid reasons for this, which was basically that's how you create liquidity in the DPO. You have the whole, we just hired a massive sales force, which we didn't have before, and we had to actually give them options. Yes. And of course, Alex Karp new 10-year option plan just expired and had to be reinitiated. All of that is true, but at the end of the day, look, I was trying to say at the end of the day, but some weird at the end of the day came out. At the end of the day, this doesn't work. Everybody got diluted. And the dilution was almost 2x every single year from 2019, 2020, 2021. For the first half of 2022, the dilution is 8%. So we went down from 96% annual dilution in the previous year to 8% for the first half of this year. So dilution is still way higher than standard, but getting slower and slower, lower and lower by the quarter. So Palantir does not need to hire as much salespeople anymore. Alex Karp plan is already in place. So dilution just came down from 96 year over year to 8% for the first 6 months of 2022. So that's also improving. Now, if you ask me, again, I'm not going to pretend to be 100% objective here since I'm a Palantir bull, but I look at it and I see dilution getting slower. I see insider selling from Karp's side non-existence. I see Karp not arrogant anymore and actually answering coherent questions or answers this case and actually talking to the point. I see multiples compressing. So except for the lack of gap profitability, everything is getting exponentially better for this company while the price keeps dropping. At least it kept on dropping. It's up today like 4%, but you understand my meaning. So if I have to rethink the whole Palantir thesis looking at these numbers, I'm not selling. Simple as that. Now you comment below, you tell me what you think. Share with me your thesis because I think the Palantir community has some of the brightest minds, and I would love to hear your input about Palantir and what you're doing with the stock. See you next video.